Pleasant good day, ladies and gentlemen, students, faculty, administrators, all. It is my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to our Economy in Perspectives Series 2022. We have been coming to you over the last years, reviewing our economy, looking at our budget, and today is no exception. We have our top group of students in USC who will be speaking to the issue of whether this budget has achieved the objectives that were set originally or not from the perspective of a student. Before we begin, we normally would have a word of prayer as a faith-based institution where we believe that God is number one. Knowledge is from God. Thank you. Let us pray. Our loving Father and our God, we are grateful for this opportunity for our students to display their knowledge, their critical skills, and to discuss the budget of 2022. We invite your divine presence among us to direct these proceedings. Let everything be done according to your name's honor and glory and for the benefit of all. We ask in your holy name. Amen. All right. Maybe I should introduce first of all our students, beginning on my left, Michelle Augustine. Michelle Augustine is one of our business students, and maybe I should say that we generally reflect the School of Business, but not only the School of Business and Entrepreneurship. Michelle Augustine will speak today on education. She will focus her deliberations on the sector education. Next to her, Naila Nayak, welcome again. Naila will focus on a very important and very topical national security sector. Straight across from Naila is our lone student gentleman. I want to welcome you, Keneal Sanderson. This is Keneal's first time with us on Economy in Perspective series, and Keneal will be discussing the perspective of health. And next to Keneal is also a newcomer. We welcome Karitsa Sukre, who will be speaking on energy, the perspectives on energy. Coming all the way from Tobago, guys, just across the seas, is Abimbola Maharaj. Abimbola has been with us before and has made significant contributions to this series, and we're happy to have her back this year and focusing on the perspectives of public utilities. Also on screen by Zoom is Israel Felix. He is our lone man outside of our presence. So he is by Zoom, and he will be looking at the perspective of agriculture as he did last year. And we're looking forward to some exciting things since agriculture seemed to continue to attract the attention of many commentators and critical analysts throughout the time. To start us off, let me just say something, give a little background. As we know, our budget for this year has been in the region of 56 billion in revenue and expenditure 57.6, with oil revenues coming in at 25 billion and non-oil at 30. What we have seen in the budget is, obviously every year the budget seems to be increasing, and the allocations seem to be somewhat similar in its proportion. So we are going to ask the students today whether that is a good thing, and to what extent they would like to provide a critical analysis of the budgetary allocations to their respective sectors, and perhaps we'll also look at any strategies that they might want to consider when they give their own presentation. Just to start us off in terms of an icebreaker, I want to ask the question to each of us, 1 minute each. Does government subsidies really help the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? Does government subsidies really help? I've given you a few pointers based on what is said nationally. But let's start with you, Michelle. Education sector. Does government subsidy really help us, the ordinary man? Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Dr. Pilgrim. Yes, the government subsidy does help in terms of the Ministry of Education, for example, GATES. It has been of great assistance to individuals, learners, young people, even the elderly who have been unable to finance themselves in tertiary education. And also the means program has also made it more successful so that those who really need it will have access to the program. So yes to that question.
Okay, so yes to that. Education gives a thumbs up to those who are checking. First thumbs up. Education says yes. Government subsidies do really help students. Well, I'll say students in this case because we're talking about GATE. Yes? So you're saying yes, they do. Let's go to health. Kenil, what do you think from the health sector perspective? Do government subsidies really help?
Yes, I do believe that government subsidies help in the health sector. As citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we all have access to free healthcare. That is something we can boast of as a nation, as not many countries in the world offer that. Regardless of financial status, everyone has access to free healthcare. For better or for worse, as many might argue that the health sector should be means tested, as there are some individuals who can afford to have to pay for health, while some others cannot. Those in the lower income bracket might not be able to.
Thank you very much. I hope the Minister of Health is listening here, and the Minister of Imbert, I hope you're listening to what one of our lead students is saying. He's saying means tested. Means tested because it's not the same across the board. Everyone has free access, but there are those who could afford 3-4 times the cost. Good point. Thank you so much, Kenil Sanderson. What about Nylan Nayak, national security? Subsidizing national security, is that helping us in any way? Are we seeing the numbers going down?
That's an interesting perspective. So yes, but no. In terms of national security and subsidies, I won't say that we really have any subsidies for national security. What I would say is that people of this country mainly benefit from the subsidies of the other ministries, such as education, healthcare, public utilities, or even the subsidies on oil and gas. We see the direct relations between those and how people are able to spend their money, the kind of access that they would be able to have, as well as equity. Equity is a really big part. But in terms of crime, from the outside looking in, I wouldn't say that it looks much different. I wouldn't say that the subsidies really make such a drastic difference in terms of reducing crime, in a sense that yes, we have access to education and GATE, we have access to free healthcare, and we see the direct links between education and crime, healthcare and crime, access to utilities such as water and crime, but we can't actually see it tangibly. Where are the results? Things such as removing taxes on maybe security cameras would be a good idea as a place to start for subsidies on national security.
Excellent point. The indirect relationship between the different sectors and national security is a very important point you have raised. Energy, could you answer that? Government subsidies.
Yes, so with respect to energy, the fuel subsidy, of course, is a major topic of discussion in this budget. And one of the areas that we have to look at is the income disparity, as my colleague mentioned here in health. The income disparity does not allow for the subsidy to be enjoyed at the same level between those in higher income brackets versus those in the lower income brackets. And so does it help all citizens on average? That could be debated if you look at the figures, but really and truly the subsidy that is applied to fuel can also be looked at as being redirected into other areas that might help citizens that are in the lower income bracket level, rather than sending money into the fuel subsidy that would support further growth in the higher income bracket level.
All right, very interesting. I can see that we are in for an exciting ride with energy. Because of course fuel subsidies touch everyone generally, but more so those at the lower income. So well said. Abimbola Maharaj, let's go to you in Tobago. We are looking at the perspective of public utilities and government subsidies. Do you think government subsidies really help citizens of Trinidad and Tobago when you look at public utilities?
Yes, I would agree that subsidies do help the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. USC and Tiantec are the main companies that are subsidized, and I think the subsidies are beneficial to citizens, but more specifically the low-income groups, which is over 210,000 households. And especially where water is concerned, it compensates for the lack of inefficiencies in the utilities that we have been experiencing over the past few years.
Well said, Abimbola. Over 200,000 homes, and as far as you're concerned, the lower income groups are positively affected by subsidies, particularly when you look at some of the big utilities like Tiantec, which is electricity, and Wassa water. We only wish that that was moved over to energy as well, but Kuritsa has some points to make on that. So thank you, Abimbola, appreciate that. Let's take our last speaker, by no means least, Israel Felix, agriculture, one of our mainstay industries or sectors. Do you think government subsidies in agriculture really do help citizens of this country? Israel.
In terms of the agricultural sector, subsidies on their own cannot get the job done because it is a sector that is heavily dependent on management. And because of the way in which our government system is designed, every term we have a change, if not a party would remain. So this last 2 terms we've remained with one party, and we are now seeing some steps towards a better plan. However, it is dependent on management more than subsidies.
All right, thank you. I'm hearing you, by virtue of what you've just said, I'm hearing you say management, but you're really talking about political leadership. I mean, I'm sensing, were you talking about political leadership? In other words, you're saying that agriculture may be looked on more favorably by one political persuasion rather than another? Is that where you're going, or are you talking about the management on the ground level? Could you just clarify that for us?
Now, over the years, we have seen agriculture being placed in a political sense. However, if it is that the agricultural sector would be looked at as a sector for the people rather than for the party, then we would see the best plans being implemented, then we would see the best outcomes being created.
Yeah.
Basically, what we need is for a party to give agriculture the attention that it needs, and even if that party were to lose the following elections, they would pass on the mantle in terms of the plans for the way forward in agriculture.
Yeah. Only then, I like how you mentioned this is a sector for the people and not for the party. I trust that those who are listening to this will understand the importance of that statement you've just raised, Israel. This sector is for the people and not for the party. And there's really quite a negativity that exists in any country, that if every time a political party is changed, everything comes to an end, then you find breadbasket sectors like agriculture negatively suffer as a result of this. There's a negative return to investment. And thank you so much for raising that. I have a lot I can say on that, but today is about the students, so I thank you for speaking. I want to just give each of you students a few minutes, probably 3 to 5 minutes, just to talk about your view of the budget as far as the sector the perspective on your sector. This is the Economy in Perspective series, and you're talking about the perspective on your sector. So we start with you, Michelle. I look at the perspective on education, and how do you see the budget having achieved what it should in your sector? Michelle.
Thank you once again, Dr. Pilgrim. Firstly, I must say that the education sector has received the greatest allocation, both last year, 2021, and this year, with 6.9 and 7.4 billion, respectively. Also, just a little summary from last year, the government did present during the budget that they would be distributing like 17,000 laptops, which about 7,000 have been distributed, with about over 2,000 mini Wi-Fi devices. So they have been making some progress, but it's way off the amount. So it means that the government needs to, should I say, ramp up in terms of their promises and let it be done faster, not way over time, 2-3 years, right? Also, physical classes has resumed, which is an excellent thing for students because we have seen in the SCA and CSEC results the impact of the online learning and what has taken place. Such as for SCA, this year, 37% of the students got over 50 in comparison to last year was 52% and the previous year 63. With regards to CSEC, this year overall in terms of all 34 subjects, 52% passed in comparison to about 56 last year. So it shows that the scores have been decreasing. So the physical resumption of schools is a great idea. Now, I must commend the government for looking into that issue and implementing the vacation revision program, which took place during the summer vacation, which about 1/3 of the targeted students attended. So it shows that the government is paying attention to the human resource or the human capital of this country, because if the scores of students continue to decline, we can have a lot more dropouts in terms of students. Even Mr. Noble Philip mentioned it, that if so many students are doing badly, they may not be able to cope with the education and they would be behind. So the ministry has also implemented the lower secondary proficiency program to test students at the Form 2 level to make sure they acquire the basic skills and knowledge before going on to Form 3. Also, I want to mention about, now, even though the government is doing all these great things, there's the issue of brain drain, where, yes, the country has a number of highly qualified and skilled persons, about 57% of tertiary educated individuals and 75% of the skilled individuals have migrated, and this is mainly true based on the issue of not getting opportunities or lack of opportunities and crime. So this is an issue that the government is aware of, but they are not paying as much attention to it. I must also commend the government on their intentions to make GATE more widely available in terms of, well, they said students who are in certain institutions that are accredited by the Accredited Council of Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of those who have diplomas and the technical vocational education, etc. So there's so much more that can be said, but I must say that the government is taking some steps into improving the human capital of this country, and I can only hope that they would be consistent and actually be effective with their proposal. Also, as long as the government continues to do this on a long-term basis, it is supposed to improve the innovation, efficiency, and productivity of the, let's say, learners in this country, the youths and the young people. And this would further, sometime in the future, improve the GDP and the GNP of the country. So it would help, in other words, with more highly educated persons, it would help in terms of the development and growth of the country. Because statistics show that countries that have higher educated citizens tend to grow more faster than those that don't. Last but not least, I would like to mention that the government needs to look more into the issue of the Venezuelan immigrant children, because out of the 6,900 of them that are in the country, only 1,500 are in schools, and a lot of them are out of school at this point in time, which means that there's a possibility that some of them can end up joining and recruiting into the gangs, and we can have more destruction in the country as what is already taking place. So that is basically my presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Michelle. What a wonderful approach and analysis that you gave of the budget as far as the education sector is concerned. I just want to pull out a few gems from what you've said, if I may. You spoke about the resumption of physical classes, and that's an important point to pay attention to. Not only this country, but many countries of the world, we have lost significantly a certain cadre of educated young people because of the COVID-19 restrictions. And clawing that back requires strategic intentionality. Should I put my name to that phrase? Strategic intentionality. In other words, you can't just hope by osmosis that people will just do better. We have to put a strategy in place to reverse what COVID did to our education sector. And so I like to, that's a gem I take from what you've said. You spoke about the vacation revision program. That targeted is unfortunately only about 30% of the target group came to it. We'd like to see more, but perhaps if that is continued over time, we might be able to claw back more and more. So that was well said. The health sector. Over the last year, since 2020, we have been reeling under COVID-19, the challenges of COVID-19, and we've just heard from education that there is some impact of that even on education. But talking about health, Keneal Sanderson, how do you see the budget from the perspective of the health sector? Share with us.
Thank you, Dr. Pilgrim. While expenditure in the healthcare sector has increased from last year by nearly 500 million TT dollars, the budget reading, in my opinion, did not mention key areas of focus in a post-COVID era. Thus far, the government has spent $123 million on vaccines, and we've received many donations from several countries in the world, including the United States, China, India. We've also received from our fellow CARICOM member states. This has, combined with the vaccine rollout initiative, this has resulted in our country achieving 51.2% vaccination rate for citizens fully vaccinated, which was a vital pivoting factor even in the reopening of our economy earlier this year. For reference, according to the Spotlight on Economy that was hosted by the Ministry of Finance earlier this month, Trinidad and Tobago ranks third in the region in vaccination coverage, only behind Guyana at 58.5% and Barbados at 53.7%. I expected the government to allocate a substantial amount to the healthcare sector in the budget, which they did. The healthcare sector has the second highest allocation at $6.892 billion, followed only behind education, which my colleague earlier mentioned. And while new hospitals are crucial to healthcare, it is but one factor to have a quality healthcare. These new buildings must be properly staffed and well equipped and have good management systems to facilitate lower length of stay for our patients. This will allow for those patients to return to their places of employment, which will increase productivity and actually boost our economy, as those individuals will be returning to work. I also expected that the government would place major emphasis on mental health. The WHO in March of 2020, the World Health Organization, released an article stating that in the first year, the global prevalence of anxiety and depression has increased by 25% in the first year only of COVID-19 pandemic. with the worst being hit are women and young children. I also expected more to be mentioned in the budget to counter the trauma of crime. We are a nation afflicted by crime, unfortunately, and I expected that more would be done to ease the minds of those victims and their families who have been affected by various crimes that are happening around in our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keneal. You had me really deep in thought while you were speaking there because I could relate to so much of what you've just said. If I could start with the last one you mentioned about the trauma of crime. You know, the government really should pay some emphasis on developing more and more trauma crisis centers. We do have, but we're not hearing enough about it. And there are so many people who are suffering. I mean, over the last year alone, the number of persons who have suffered with domestic abuse and just that alone and domestic abuse that we understand may be spiraled or fueled by the restrictions of COVID that forced some people to be in the same space longer than normal. Am I saying that right? Yeah? And so to me, and I agree with you therefore, from a student perspective, you're right, and from a teacher perspective and an adult perspective, yes, we need that. Trauma of crime, or crime trauma centers more, so that the government shows that we care about those who are affected by crime. And mental health, I want to just pick that as a gem that you mentioned. Many people look at mental health, they look down their noses at mental health. Everything else is if you have some ailment or something, it's normal, but if you have mental health, people watch you funny. Mental health is just a health issue as any other health issue. So what are we doing about it? So yeah, I mean, just last week we heard about a report that indicated that more than 25% increase in depression and mental health illness and so on. Anxiety attacks and depression have gone up, and as a result, crime. Thank you for your contribution. Appreciate it. This segues nicely to crime and national security, which is perhaps one of the biggies for us in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. We have seen an all-time growth in crime rates, and all the criminologists could argue that perhaps this might have to do with the restrictions of COVID-19 that have impacted families and societies. Perhaps they might want to argue that because people have lost jobs and so many have gone from having to have not, and so they have turned to crime. Perhaps. I'd really love to hear the perspective of Naila Nayak on crime and national security.
Right, so national security was the third largest allocation of the budget at $5.798 billion, which was an increase of about $134 million compared to last year's budget. This allocation spoke mainly of infrastructural improvements such as technological upgrades and biometric scanners, which is really great. They spoke about upgraded command centers and new vessels, which I think they mentioned that in the last budget too, you know, so I wasn't quite sure how to feel about that. But these are all very valuable, and they will all aid in the role of reducing crime. So it's a step in the right direction. That being said, we have to talk about the figures, right? TNT is currently heading for its highest murder rate in history after crossing the 200 murder... My apologies. After crossing the 200 murder mark in less than 5 months. So, according to Dr. Andy Sipasad, he has predicted, using statistics that he gathered from the TTPS Crime and Problem Analysis Branch, that we could see up to 710 murders a year by the year 2030. And we are already in September of 2022, and we have already crossed the 400 mark for the murder rate. So it's quite scary when we look at those figures. Now, upon listening to many post-budget forums with contributions made by the respective ministers, a few things became quite apparent to me that the budget didn't really address, and these are all things that the ministers themselves would have known. So I really wish they spoke about it some more. Number one being that it is known that white-collar crime plays a serious hand in the crimes taking place in our streets. Minister Hines himself said that the window and the inflow of guns is really causing the spike in murders. Moreover, that a lot of state agencies are populated by individuals who are complicit in this crime problem. So, in doing my research, the last thing we really heard about clearing up white-collar crimes was back in November last year, when the United States teamed up with TTPS. And since then, I haven't really heard much else about it. I know that they were looking for forensic accountants and auditors, because when we're talking about white-collar crimes, we're talking about money and paper trails. So, where has it gone? The second thing that I really wanted to note was reformation of the judicial system and prison systems. These are really necessary. These are a crucial part if we want to see the criminal justice system be more up-to-date and efficient. So we may never forget the businesswoman who lost her life to bandits, whom were known to have a criminal record, or even Ashanti and Andrea. I will always remember these young ladies because their lives were taken too soon from them by men who should not have been on the streets. These people should not have been outside walking around with so many criminal records to their name. So according to the Stand Together Trust organization based in the US, this evidence-based prison reform has been shown to reduce recidivism. And when we talk about that, we're talking about inmates who come out and they don't commit the same crimes again because they have changed. This is what we want to see. We want to save taxpayer expenditures because I cannot be paying taxes, pushing it into the prison systems, and nothing is changing. We want to increase future employment for individuals who are incarcerated as well, because when they come out of prison, they go right back onto the streets and do what they know, because what else could they really do? Nobody wants to hire a criminal. And we also have to decrease rule violations in the prison facilities. So essentially, we are talking about a switch in the mindset of these individuals. So, would you like to know the most effective methods in prison reform? Pay key attention to these. Number one is mental health support. Number two is holistic faith-based programs. Number three is substance abuse treatment. And number four being educational and vocational classes. Now, I do find it quite interesting to note that all of these solutions come from a mentally stimulating approach, and not just the physical aspect of things. Which brings me to my final point. Being that crime has been declared a public health issue, where is the collaboration with the health sector or even the educational sector to deal with this in a manner that really targets it from a holistic approach? Because clearly just dealing with it from the approach of police or even fighting fire with fire is clearly not going to work anymore. We have to take new approaches. We have to be more all-rounded when we have to tackle these things. And it's important because a health issue such as crime would definitely start in the mind. And when we think about that, we have to deal with societal structures. They are no longer the same. We no longer have villages raising our child, as they would say. And even to mention the crimes being committed by people who seem to come from well-off families or highly educated families. What is causing this? This has to be a shift in the way that people are socialized. From a young age, we have to deal with the socialization of our youth, and this is very important. So, a proactive approach to crime that focuses on mental health, faith, and education is definitely needed. I would love to see something like that being done on a large scale in the future, because I know that we have many NGOs already doing things like these. There's an NGO currently called the Not OK organization. They have access to free mental health services on our website, notok.org. And it's important to know that we have access to these resources when we need it, because oftentimes people will not know where to go. So that's really important. So with this in mind, I would like to encourage our citizens to not give up and to not become complacent with our young ones as well. The youth of this nation would do well with the support of all of us, and we have to continue to remember the role that faith plays in our daily interactions with each other. So let me leave you with one of my favorite Bible verses, right? So Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And I think this is very important to remember, because the war against crime is only over when we give up. And we can't give up. So thank you.
Nearly. That was an excellent treatment on the perspective of the government budget, the national budget, I should say, on national security. You raised some really, really interesting points, which I'm sure the Minister of National Security would want to pay attention to. You pointed out the challenges of prison reform. That's a major point. The whole issue of recidivism that needs to be looked at, because quite often people leave the prisons and they come right back. So what are we doing when they get inside there, that crucible called the prison? What do we do in the crucible to change? Is any metamorphosis taking place inside there? Are we changing the cocoon to a butterfly, or is it turning to something else? So that's a very, very big point you raised. And of course, the benefit to... Let's go to Abimbola Maharaj. Abimbola, we spoke a while ago about public utilities. So we're coming off crime a little bit, but we want to talk a bit about those public utilities and to what extent has the budget impacted on this sector. Could you give us a perspective, please, for just about 3 to 5 minutes? Abimbola Maharaj.
So the allocation for the public utility sector was $2.8 billion. And so there was a small increase compared to the previous financial year, which was about $2.6 billion. And the budget mainly highlighted plans to improve the public utilities sector so that it can help meet the demand and expectations of citizens. So firstly, to speak on TSTT, the financial minister spoke briefly on TSTT and how they are upgrading the infrastructure that will allow connectivity that is needed to transform the country digitally. And so he said that the platform already have 1.9 million mobile subscribers, with 1.1 million of these have an internet connection. And I believe that TSTT is going in the correct direction in terms of digitalization, because during the pandemic, we saw that their profits declined and their competitors such as Zoom and WhatsApp were able to stay afloat, but they were not. And so we see that they restructured, and so I think that they are going in the right path. Now, concerning the utilities, the main utilities, water and electricity, which are still heavily subsidized, the finance minister stated that the tariff reviews are still being undertaken by the RIC in relation to rates being increased. And even before the budget was read, he said in a conference that the government cannot keep subsidizing water, electricity, and fuel. And so we saw the issue with fuel, and it takes $700 million per year to subsidize electricity. And this is due to the fact that the company buys natural gas from NGC, who buys from companies such as BP Limited and Shell. And over these past 10 years, the NTEC haven't been paying for their purchases, so now they are owing $7 billion. And we can see how this will affect the company, and also combining that with the fact that they spend more than they earn. So, you know, this is a major issue, but one they are hoping to combat by looking at these subsidies. And it goes back to the discussion we were having before. These subsidies, only a certain class of people benefit really from these subsidies. So I hope when he is reducing subsidies, when it comes to that he keeps in mind, you know, the lower income people. And one more thing he mentioned about including renewable energy into the electricity supply mix. And I think this is a great initiative, because the inclusion of renewable energy would support energy conservation, and it would benefit not only the country, but also the environment. So it is a great initiative that I fully support. And speaking of initiatives, we spoke about the ongoing initiatives that improve water supply on the island. And they had two programs. We spoke about the National Water Sector Improvement Program, and that provided 6,610 citizens improvement on how much water they get during the week. So those who are just getting 2 to 3 days, now they see an improvement of maybe 4 days. And so with the other program, over 100,000 citizens have been benefiting, and he said that now 51% of the population enjoy a 24/7 service of water. And we see that this is an improvement from the 34% earlier up in June. Okay, so I hope that these small changes, these incremental changes, remain persistent so that more of the population can benefit from consistent water supply. And WASA has been given the clear by the industrial court to proceed with its restructuring of the organization. And we know WASA dealt with a plethora of problems, including the company being overstaffed. And we saw that, they start from the top, the managers were being laid off. Because when we compare WASA to a normal company, they had like 8 levels of management compared to a normal 3 or 4. And that shouldn't have been allowed in the first place. But it's good to see that now they are taking corrective measures to deal with such. And we also need another problem with WASA is having the equipment to perform simple jobs as pipe installations. They don't have the in-house equipment to do this. And so they are reliant on contractors, and I never saw anything in the budget that spoke to this. How, as a monopoly, how they want to combat this issue. And so WASA too, just like Tiante, is in debt to these contractors. They are in debt. And so this is the main issue with the utilities. And overall, the public utility sector is gradually putting itself into place as best as it can, to meet the demands of citizens, to encourage more efficiency and productivity in the sector.
Thank you so much, Abimbola. That was excellent review, analysis of the sector. I just want to pull one thing out. I pass many places around in Trinidad and maybe Tobago, and I see water wasting. I see pipes burst. One day, call and give a report, and the next day it still bursts. And the next day, and the next day. I don't want to ask you, Abimbola, because you're not the one, but I suppose that level of wastage needs to be addressed as well. And perhaps one could argue that a budget doesn't do that, but yes, it can. A budget could put money into preventing or turning around that level of wastage and so on. And you spoke about the restructuring, the need for restructuring because of the high number of levels of management. People sitting on management are not necessarily achieving productivity. That is significant, and that is probably not just in the one that you mentioned, but all public utilities, all that we remanage and restructure to make sure that it runs in line with private sector organizations where people are held to ransom for productivity and not just do what you wanted but still get paid and get increase in pay. So, thank you so much, Abimbola, for raising these important matters of accountability, restructuring, staffing and all. Productivity, raising that into our attention. Now, we have two very important sectors to look at perspectives on, and we have 10 minutes remaining, I was told. So we're going to ask the two important sectors. Now, all the sectors are important, but I'm talking about energy, which is the reason why we are supposed to have a surplus, a certain amount of money, energy, but we want to look into that, and agriculture, which really is supposed to be the breadbasket holding the economy together. So we're going to close with those two. I'm going to give you 3 to 4 minutes to give your summary, to give your analysis. I will start with Karitza, who will look at energy. Then I'm going to go immediately to Israel, who will do agriculture, and then I will comment on you both at the end. Karitza.
Thank you, Dr. Pilgrim. So I'll be brief as I can be. We look at first I have to make mention that this budget for Trinidad and Tobago, this is the highest prices for energy for both oil and for gas that we have ever been pegged to. So for last budget, our oil was pegged to $67, and this year we are at $92.50 versus gas last year was $3.75, and now we are pegged at $6. So we have some serious inflationary prices that are being used to present our budget for 2023. One of the things that I noticed in the budgets is at the same conversation that we had the last budget, which was speaking to increasing and boosting our production. Revenue is a product of both output and prices, and we have been having a significant shortfall in the output parts of things. So last year, the Minister of Finance was more optimistic, and he was looking at reaching 3.3 billion standard cubic feet for gas production, and he was also hoping that by the end of 2022 that the oil production would have been around 86,000, I believe it was, yes. And so we are very far off from that. Right now we currently stand at 2.6 in our gas production, and as of May we were at 57,400 in our oil production. So we are definitely falling short on production, and so we are not being able to maximize on the revenues that we could have earned, so that different sectors, different ministries would have been allocated even more funds to be more productive. So we have that shortfall there. 3 areas that I'll touch on very briefly: the fuel subsidy, which is a key point in the budget. The subsidy, basically, just to reiterate what the minister explained, the subsidy is based on market prices. So we, as the citizens, have our standard prices that we are paying, and the market price, which is the market price. We don't set those prices, and the subsidy is the difference between what we pay and what the market price is. So if the market price goes up, because oil is a factor input of gas, then and our figure stays the same for what we pay, then the government will be mandated to pay more towards the subsidy. That money could have been allocated into other sectors. And so because the burden is becoming so tough, as oil prices have been inflated for a significant amount of time, they've taken the measure to reduce the fuel subsidy and shared some of that burden with the citizens. Now, while I understand why this may have been taken, I would have liked to have heard some more things speaking to directly alleviating some of the pressures on the pockets of the citizens. So I didn't hear as much discussion about what alternatives that they're putting forward that might come on stream. Last budget, they spoke about bringing on electric PTSC buses, but it would have been nice to have heard that in tandem with increasing the price of fuel, that would have come on stream as well to give citizens an option, more choices. But you know, so we'll move on that. We have some other positives, incentives that they put forward to boost production, because as I mentioned before, it's production and prices. And so the supplemental petroleum tax, they've moved from being fixed to tiered to encourage investors, so that should the price of oil, because the prices of oil and gas are volatile, so should it fall below the $50, that investors could feel a little more secure in knowing that they will not be mandated to pay that tax, and you have the decrease in the petroleum tax. So we have some fiscal regimes that were put in place there to assist with production. We have also taken a step into diversification a bit, and from an environmentally conscious perspective, and they have spoken about a lot of initiatives, energy, green energy policies that they put on the board and moving in the right direction. So we have the solar plant that's supposed to be 112 megawatts that's supposed to come on stream. We have the PRCO project, we have the methanol project, we have the aluminum project. So we have several projects that are due to come on stream. The solar plant as soon as 2023, the beginning of 2023, that they want to start implementing that. So we have some diversification and also initiatives with other sectors like manufacturing and agriculture to kind of move us away from dependency on fossil fuels, to, maximize the amount of money that we spend and decrease our emissions and earn more revenues. So we have that. One of the things that I want to touch on very briefly, as I'm trying to rush here, our energy prices and how conscious we have to be of the volatility of it. Energy prices could go up or down, and if we look on the downside, the prices of energy would go down because USA is the #1 consumer, and they're followed by China. And in the US, they are looking at a recession. The recession is looming, and so there's a decrease in productivity, decrease in demand. And that decrease in demand will put some downward pressure on prices, in addition to what is happening in China. Every time China has a lockdown, that also puts downward pressure on demand, and that will help bring the prices down. We also have a strengthening US dollar, which will also add some pressure. On the flip side, however, we have the special reserve that is due to end tomorrow. That's 1,000,000 barrels of oil per day that will now be removed from the markets that was released by the US. And coming at the beginning of December, the Russian sanctions are going to come into effect. We also have, in that period of time, winter season, when there's going to be higher dependency on oil and gas. So we have a lot of players, as well as the geopolitical landscape. So we have a lot of factors that could determine whether prices go up or down. And so we have to be, as I mentioned last year, I said the government should exercise some fiscal discipline, and I saw some of that in the fuel subsidies, so I'm not going to give any more advice. But we have to just be mindful that the prices could go up or down, and that could significantly change things for all sectors.
Thank you, Karitza. Obviously, the government listened to you last year. So the recommendation you gave was taken seriously. So be careful what you say here. Yeah. What I would really have liked to see of the sector, Karitza, appreciate that very much. Of course, we recognize that our revenue base is based heavily on oil and gas right now. But as you rightly said, revenue is equal to price multiplied by quantity. So while the price goes up, that's great. What about the quantity? So the production levels need to match. Well said. Thank you very much. Israel, over to you to bring up the powerhouse called agriculture. Return to Israel Felix. Perspectives on agriculture.
Hello, everyone. So this year's presentation, am I muted? This year's presentation shows a lot of promise, with an additional $300 million being allocated to the agriculture sector. We are looking at the beginning of a feasible plan in partnership with Guyana and other CARICOM nations. To quote the financial minister in the recently held Agri-Investment Forum and Expo, it was a resounding success, and it followed the inaugural event held in Guyana and will be followed by others in the region. Our expo saw over 30,000 participants from a broad cross-section of Trinidad and Tobago. So the aim of this collaboration is to curb our dependence on foreign nations for important crops such as grain and corn, which directly affect our food import bill and our manufacturing sectors. We have seen how these problems can correlate directly to the prices of common goods such as chicken and flour when we have supply chain issues within, with the recent war between Ukraine and Russia. We had supply chain issues in terms of grain and corn, which directly affected companies such as Nutrimix and our local flour processing mills. So these negatively impacted our prices, and it led to the prices increasing. The allocations this year are directed into boosting the local production in terms of agro-processing and to reduce our reliance, as I said, on our highly processed import foods. The government is also looking into building more effective agricultural based and sustainable chains in terms of adding more innovation and digitization and technology towards the sector. Their aim is to provide a lot more engagement towards the private sector and small farmers and youth within the country, as well as women. They have also addressed certain issues in terms of nutrition and non-communicable diseases that are persistent in the increasing levels of obesity amongst children and adults due to the diet and lifestyle choices that we currently have in this country. As again, we heavily rely on imported foods, which at times may not be the healthier choice. The Youth Agricultural Shade House project, administered by the University of the West Indies and the agricultural sector, an extension unit of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, is a one-year program that's focused on specialized hands-on training in the intensive farming within small portions of land to create very high yield crops. The program is to engage young people between the ages of 16 to 35 to participate in a 12-month training period in which 100 participants would be selected. Now, all of these promises are very much feasible. However, once again, we are calling on our ministers and those in charge for a little more transparency and clarity. A lot of these promises involve land, they involve large sums of money, and they involve a lot of time that cannot be regained. And if these assets were to be used in the wrong ways, or if they were to not be used at all, what we would simply be doing is wasting time yet another year. So we call on everyone in charge to make sure that the job is done in terms of agriculture, because we see a direct correlation in the spike of crime as it is related to the rise in the gas prices and the rise in food prices. And basically, our salaries have been at the same level and they have not risen at all. So naturally, we would see a lot more households. Naturally, we'd see a lot more households in need of food, and this would often stem into the choice to turn to crime as a solution. And in order for us to go forward as a country, we would need to find a way to curb that sort of mindset and that solution.
Israel, I think you might have dropped. Are you still there?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Israel, I want to ask you a question. You just talked about recalibrating the mindset. That's a powerful point. Are you thinking that we need to get back to the days when more people pursue agriculture at the university or the school level? Is that what you're thinking?
I am thinking that agriculture needs to be our next, in the same mindset that a couple years ago persons used to believe that the easiest way to success in Trinidad and Tobago is to work for Petrotrin. I think the new mindset needs to be that the easiest way for success in Trinidad and Tobago is to farm. Because right now it's a tax-free industry, which means everything that you make is yours. So I believe that the mindset needs to change, yes.
All right, thank you. I don't know if you should have said that tax-free thing because it might give some people some ideas. Huh? next thing you hear, there's a new tax on. Right. Okay. So, but it's a very good point you've raised about recalibrating the mindset. I must say, you didn't mention on this occasion whether the government should have focused something on the immigrant population, immigrant labor. I remember you raised that the last time. Is that still relevant? We have so many, in education we said we had 6,900, I think, immigrant students, yes? What do you think?
In terms of the necessary factors needed to support agriculture on a whole,
Yeah.
we have generally in this country a shortage of workers, skilled workers in the agricultural sector, because it tends to be simply in the secondary schools, we would see persons choosing agriculture as a last subject. It wouldn't be a person's priority as opposed to the sciences and the business subjects and those other stuff. Agri-science is often seen as a subject that is less than. However, the direction that our country is going in terms of the prices at the grocery, in terms of the day-to-day living costs and expenses, we would see agriculture as definitely our way out or definitely our way of dealing with this situation in terms of finance.
All right. Thank you for that. You have highlighted food security. That's important. We've just talked about immigrant labor, skilled labor. That's important. You talked about the resources of land, time, and money. That's critical to drive this sector. We talk about recalibrating the mind away from thinking that agriculture is the bastard child, the one that is not important. We need to change that. I heard someone say the black sheep of the family of all the sectors. We need to stop that. We need to retrain ourselves, but that starts from the top. Yes? And perhaps where the budget could have come through, maybe there should have been an incentive or an incentivization strategy put in place to drive agriculture. So we put more incentives so people will go because, of course, incentives make a difference. So the extra percentages, if the wage level or the return on the investment in that sector was significant, perhaps we could attract more people to go there. So, yes, go ahead, please, Israel.
With the allocated 300 million from this year's budget, there are in fact some incentives. I've read that there are incentives basically in the range of 300,000 over around 50 persons that would be able to qualify for the incentives in terms of being able to buy certain equipment and to go towards the digitization of the sector as well. We also saw the government working with a number of already established farms towards their expansion, and there are incentives. However, the access to the incentives is a little bit murky and a little bit cloudy, and again, we call for a little more transparency.
Right. Okay, so we're back into a very key point in terms of accessibility. Well, let's call it implementation of the policy. So yes, there is money thrown at it, but the next step, which is the implementation phase, is where we see a lot of problems. And the whole issue of transparency and corruption becomes relevant not just here, but in all sectors. But of course, if you're looking at this sector as a turning point sector, then we need to stave off or get rid of some of the opportunities for lack of transparency and increase of corruption. We need to get rid of those things. Food security is important. We talked about the supply chain being affected negatively by the Ukraine war. Those things are important. So we need a security sector. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. We need a secure sector. Sorry, I don't mean to interfere in Nyla's national security sector, but we say we need a secure sector that drives productivity and financial returns in a way that could help us to look towards an economic diversification over time from a dependence on fossil fuel energy. I want to thank every one of you for your contributions. I know we have just about run out of time, but I always like to ask you if there's one thing you want to give as a giveaway. Just one. It might just take 2 words. Just what giveaway or what gem, what would you like to leave with those who listen to this recording and those who are here today? What would you like to leave? And I want to start from the top, coming all the way down. Just one thing. Take your mic and tell us one thing as a giveaway you'd like to leave as a gem. Let's start with you, Michelle.
Okay, so if the Minister of Education ever comes across this video, I would like to leave with her specifically and her team that it is important that the proposal and all the different programs that they intend and they already started implementing, that they be consistent in order to see growth over time in this country.
Consistency is the word that I'm hearing. You say, thank you. Keneal, Health.
Yes, if there's anyone from the office of the Minister of Health watching this, I would like to say to them to please consider expenditure in the sectors of mental health and trauma for our citizens. Yes.
Okay, mental health and trauma crisis mediation. Thank you very much, Keneal. Nyla, National Security. You're not on.
Right. So if anyone from the Ministry of National Security can hear this, I would just like to appeal to them to take a more holistic approach to crime and continue to listen to what the people are saying, listen to what the people want, and I would continue to appeal to our society to be mindful of the way that we interact with each other. Remember, we wouldn't see any changes with the crime if we don't really become more loving as people towards each other.
Thank you, Nyla. Holistic approach. And of course, those of us who have studied sociology and have read Harold Ambos, we know that the institutions of the family, the church, the school, these are the institutions that impact the community. And Nyla shared with us that she thinks that we're not paying enough attention to the church or the faith factor in turning people around in national security crime. Thank you. What about you? Let's go to Karitza.
I wouldn't want to say too much this time around, but what I will say is taken from Psalm 49, verse 20. In prosperity, people lose their good sense. And I would hope that in the prosperous times that we are in now, that we don't lose our good sense.
Wow, that's so deep. I wish we had time to unpack that. Psalm 49:20. Write it down, ladies and gentlemen. Psalm 49:20. In prosperity, people lose their good sense. Wow. Whew. I'll say nothing more. Let's go to Abimbola, Public Utilities. Just one takeaway.
I have only 2 words for the public utility sector, and it is consistency and patience.
Consistency and what? What's the second word?
Patience.
Patience. All right. Yeah, we have to have a lot of patience when it comes to public utilities. Indeed. Thank you so much. Israel.
My
Agriculture.
final takeaway in terms of the agricultural sector is that agriculture is a sector of the people, not the party.
I didn't get that, Israel. Would you please repeat? I didn't get that.
Agriculture is a sector of the people, not the party.
All right, yeah. If that is I'd like you to please coin it and, make sure you put your name against it. Agriculture is a sector for the people and not for the party. That's such an amazing point. I like it. I have it here, but I'll always put your name next to it, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, students, administrators, faculty, all, this has been our 2022 edition of Perspectives on the Economy. We just want to thank you for your time. We want to especially thank today our guests, our erudite panelists, Michelle Augustine, Nyla Nayak, Keneal Sanderson, Karitza Sukre, Abimbola Maharaj, Israel Felix. We'd like to thank you all for your contribution today to this very important debate on the 2022 budget. Next time around, we will take the teacher's perspective and those of the public. We have run out of time for today, but we'd just like to thank you. God bless you all, and we pray that each one of us remember that the agriculture sector is for the people and not for the party. I want to leave you with that because, Israel, I love it. I really do love it. And also, I want to remind us, you've heard several Bible texts being brought out here. The truth of the matter is that our economy and our national society, or our community, depends on our people knowing a God. The Bible says that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, and that knowledge is knowledge of God. I trust and pray that we would all have benefited from today's presentation. I thank you. God bless you. Until the next Economy in Perspectives by the University of the Southern Caribbean. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.